Hey everyone, welcome back to the layout once again. It has been a very long time since the last layout update, and although I have already been uploading some videos, which will continue every Tuesday, I haven't really done a traditional update style video yet. So what I want to do today is just kind of go over the whole layout and explain to you what all has changed in the last 2 years. So right away you'll notice that the upper level is completely unrecognizable from the last layout update I did back in 2021. And the reason for that is this layout used to be titled the Plains Division, and it featured a lower level set in Montana, and then the upper level here, it was Crawford Hill, which was a mountain grade helper district in Nebraska. So I decided to completely scrap the setting of the upper level, get rid of Crawford Hill, and continue the theme of the lower level. So now this layout is basically the western grade of Marias Pass from Whitefish, Montana, which is the yard here on the lower level, to Marias Summit all the way at the top. So the upper level, which was Crawford, Nebraska, like over here on this shelf, up to Belmont at the top of the grade, is now the stretch of grade on Marias Pass from Essex, which is this scene right here that used to be Crawford, to once again Marias Summit up here at the top. So that's the big change, but a lot's happened in scenes even on the lower level as well. So we're basically just going to walk through and I'll try to explain briefly what all is different. So before we get to any of the scenery, I do want to show you the dispatching room back here. This used to be much uglier. There's exposed insulation and piping, and I've covered that all up with some hardboard. So it's clearly not painted or finished yet, but it does look a lot more presentable, and it's actually a nice place to sit for the dispatcher. And although I don't have it set up right now, I do now have block detection, signaling, and remote turnout control that enables a CTC style dispatching screen when we have our layout computer hooked up back here. So if we are standing back here and then we turn out to the layout room, the first scene that we get to is Whitefish, Montana, down on the lower level. So in terms of name places and locations on the lower level, not much has changed, but it has progressed scenically. So at Whitefish, really the biggest difference from a couple years ago is that the tracks are painted. So I used Krylon Camouflage Flat Brown, and then you can see a simple backdrop has been painted as well to hint at the distant mountains that surround Whitefish. Down here on the east end of the yard, we are starting to collect a number of structures and details that will eventually be the crew facilities down here on the east end of Whitefish. And then this mound back here is eventually going to lead up to the abutment of an overpass that goes over the yard, and that will be Baker Avenue, like on the prototype. As we move even further east in Whitefish, the engine facility is a carryover from a couple years ago. Not much has really changed here. The only difference is that I have finally installed the tracks in the back there, so that now the rails continue all the way through that building, and we can stage our consist or geometry trains and whatever else needs to go back here. So I have actually just had an operating session this week, so all the trains are pretty much staged right where we left them. And one train that you'll notice sitting on the yard lead here is the Columbia Falls local. So this is a local that runs out of Whitefish Yard. We've got a couple GP38-2s there running the local. So as we continue up the main line here, we're going to head towards Columbia Falls and take a look at the new track arrangement and new industries over there. So again, scenically, for the most part, on the lower level up to this point, it's all the same. The tracks have been painted, there's a simple backdrop in place, and that's really all that's changed. But up here at Columbia Falls, one of the things that I did was completely remove all of the original industry track work, and now we are focusing solely on the Weyerhaeuser medium density fiberboard plant that is located at Columbia Falls. So the buildings are not yet built, but I have really the main pieces is going to be these three structures that you see here, and they're all cut to shape and in place, but of course they need to be painted and detailed and all of that. And it's a very simple track arrangement. If you look at the fascia panel here, it's really just a single spur to the Weyerhaeuser plant, And then there actually is a short runaround track which doubles as interchange with the Mission Mountain Railroad, which used to own and operate the Kalispell subdivision that ran down to Kalispell, Montana, and swung off to the southwest at Columbia Falls. So this track that is swinging into the backdrop there, it's functionally just a tail track, but it is supposed to simulate the Kalispell branch that heads south. So when the Columbia Falls switcher comes up here, it will spot and pick up cars at the Weyerhaeuser plant. You can see a couple box cars right there on spot 3 and 4. And then also we'll simulate interchange with the Mission Mountain Railroad on this track here, where you see these two center beam flat cars. So leaving Columbia Falls and coming up the grade, we end around the end of the peninsula, and then we enter the scene of Belton, Montana, and this is where the ballast work and scenery work picks up. So this is probably the most complete scene on the layout right now. It's a pretty cool scene. Really just open scenery, right? So we've got the Middle Fork Flathead River there down below. That has not been poured yet. It's just painted at the moment. So we'll get to pouring the river here soon, and I'll have another layout update once that's complete. There's still some ballast work to do around the bridge, but you can see that we've got rocks and a number of trees in place, and a couple of tunnels, which we'll take a look at too. You can see right now there's a coal train heading upgrade with some helpers on the rear end, and because I'm lazy, we've been running the coal train eastbound with loads, which isn't entirely prototypically accurate, but the train nonetheless needs the helpers. So one thing you'll notice here as well is that there's actually another layer in the backdrop. So it's a very simple backdrop technique. I've really got 4 paint colors basically. Up to this point it's only been the 3, but now I have a darker toned foreground tree line, as you can see, which I think it's simple but effective. And then you'll see some interesting rock stratigraphy. This is inspired by some rock formations in John F. Stevens Canyon, which is just around the corner from Belton, which is otherwise known as West Glacier on the prototype. So that's really where most of the scenery inspiration came from in this scene. And as we work up this way, we hit tunnel 4.0, which has some cool external bracing on it. And then we pop out of tunnel 4.0 and we get over here to a little retaining wall, a very steep sort of canyon rock wall as well. And then there is tunnel 3.9, and this is where the trains disappear and transition to the upper level. And here is the other end of tunnel 4.0. So for the most part, this scene is more or less complete. There's going to be obviously additions, lots of details to add, some scenery additions as well, like smaller trees and bushes. But in terms of broad strokes, the scene of Belton is pretty complete. Of course, the river needs to go in as well. And then a cool detail I added recently was a flange greaser, which of course is covered by the coal train right now, but I'll throw up a photo. One of the cool things, well, I guess not cool, it's kind of terrible, I guess, that happened recently was a bridge collapse in Montana on the Montana Rail Link. And what's interesting is that Montana Rail Link has been, well, I guess BNSF really has been rerouting the coal trains that typically would head over the Montana Rail Link onto the Highline subdivision. So they've been making appearances over Marias Pass, and then they've also sent a number of Montana Rail Link SD70 ACEs, like the one you see here, over the line as well. So I actually purchased this locomotive a few months ago before any of that happened, but it's kind of cool that now operationally it actually makes sense to have this locomotive. So where that coal train is sitting right now, it is continuing upgrade, and then it'll transition out of the dispatcher's room and then to the upper level. So this is where we get to the brand new scenery on the upper level. Not only brand new scenery, but new name places as well. So we'll pop out of the overpass there, and what used to be Crawford, Nebraska has now transformed into Essex, Montana. So I'm modeling kind of a wet day here. So you can see there's some sheen, some gloss on the, what is that called? The grade crossing concrete panels there. And this is where we get our first signal. So there's two CTC controlled passing sidings on the upper level. This is the first of them here at Essex. And I did rearrange some of the track work here. So there used to be a small little yard and interchange track out front in Crawford, and then there was a grain elevator with a spur track in the back. And I removed all of that and then sort of reversed the track that swung off the front of the layout. And the one that you see right here is supposed to represent the yard lead for the small maintenance of way and helper yard that is at Essex. And then in the back, where we have this short little ballast train, there's a little siding off of the main lines on the prototype Essex, and they use that, it seems like, oftentimes to stage maintenance of way equipment or ballast trains like the one you see here. So here's the perspective looking west. So trains would come out of the overpass there, upgrade eastbound.